Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, allow me to welcome all of you today and to thank the organizers, the Sovereign Order of Malta and IOM, and the co-sponsors, the Permanent Mission of Colombia, Liechtenstein, and the US mission. Contemporary slavery is a grave violation of human rights, affecting more than 50 million individuals worldwide. Victims of human trafficking often face multiple forms of abuse, exploitation, and trauma. 23 years after the Palermo Protocol, the scourge of human trafficking is far from being defeated. The goal of this side event is to provide accurate and up-to-date information about the different forms of contemporary slavery, to address misconceptions about contemporary slavery and emphasize its global nature, and we want to equip individuals with the knowledge to identify contemporary signs of contemporary slavery, enabling them to take action. We also want to create a platform for advocating policy changes at local, national, and international levels to strengthen anti-slavery laws and enforcement mechanisms, and to foster collaboration among governments, international organizations, NGOs, businesses, religious congregations, and civil society. And we must pool our resources and efforts to combat contemporary slavery and rehabilitate survivors. Today, we shall discuss the roles of digital outreach, awareness events, partnerships, and community engagement. This side event is live streamed and will be available on Vimeo and YouTube. Today, we have the honor to have a panel of experts, both in person and online. First, Dr. Berta Fernandez Alfaro, IOM Chief of Mission, Coordination Office for Switzerland and Liechtenstein. She has 20 years of experience in the field of migration and development. She will discuss IOM's role in the prevention of contemporary slavery. And thank you very much for all your efforts in the preparation of this side event and our ongoing cooperation, actually, against human slavery in Geneva and in Switzerland. Then, Her Excellency Cindy Dyer, Ambassador at Large, Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, the U.S. Department of State. Ambassador Dyer is a human rights advocate and lawyer with 3 decades of experience working at the local, national, and international levels to prevent and respond to human trafficking, sexual assault, and domestic violence. For 12 years, she was the Vice President for Human Rights at Vital Voices Global Partnerships, an international NGO advancing women's leadership. She will share the impact of the annual Trafficking in Person report. And I must say, I'm very grateful to Ambassador Dyer. She will deliver a video statement, and as you see, it's a very strong statement. To my left, Professor Tomoya Obokata, Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Slavery, Human Rights Council. He will share his activity as Special Rapporteur. He is a Japanese scholar of international law and human rights, specializing in transnational organized crime, human trafficking, and modern slavery. Professor Obokata currently serves as Professor of International Law and Human Rights at York University in the UK, and previously taught at Queen's University Belfast and Dundee University. And also, thank you very much for being with us today. We really appreciate your work as Special Rapporteur and your participation in person here. And last, Mrs. Alice Eckstein, Project Director for the Finance Against Slavery and Trafficking FAST initiative. That's a Liechtenstein initiative. Mrs. Eckstein is Program Manager for the Modern Slavery Program at United Nations University Center for Policy Research in New York, and she will deliver a statement from New York. She manages Delta 8.7, an innovative project that serves as Alliance 8.7 global knowledge platform and helps policy actors understand and use data responsibly to inform policies that contribute to achieving Target 8.7. Previously, Alice Eckstein was Executive Director at New York University's School of Professional Studies, Center for Global Affairs. She will present the work of FAST and the importance of the financial sector in combating modern slavery. And again, thanks also to the Permanent Mission of Liechtenstein for co-sponsoring, co-organizing this event. It will be quite interesting to listen to Mrs. Eckstein. So after the presentation, we shall open a discussion with participants. So now, can we proceed with Dr. Fernandez? You have the floor. Thank you for being here. Yes? Yes. That's it. Usual. That's fine.
I am.
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. So, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much to the Order of Malta, and thank you also to the Permanent Mission. No. Yeah. Ah.
Yes. Oh, use my pen. Use my.
Yeah. Well, yes, always prepared for anything. That's the name of the game. So hello to everyone, and thank you to the Order of Malta and also to the Permanent Mission of Liechtenstein for the invitation to speak here today. Just a few words. I mean, we wanted to discuss with you a bit of the main topics and our main concerns as IOM, where human trafficking is an issue that we've been working on for more than 3 decades. And it's a topic that also I've been personally involved in and I'm very familiar from my days working in the Americas, but also here in Switzerland. Yeah, thank you. So, looking back, you know, I think it's really important to take stock of the global efforts to prevent trafficking in persons from happening. And I remember, I mean, during the 1990s discussions around transnational organized crime, there was a recognition of all the all-pervasive threat to security and sovereignty that organized crime posed. And so when the convention was adopted, along with its 3 protocols on trafficking in persons, smuggling of migrants, and trafficking in firearms, I remember it was 2003, it entered into force, and it was really an incredible milestone for all of us working on the subject. Nowadays, with 191 parties, the Transnational Organized Crime Convention, UNTOC, is almost universally ratified a legal instrument, which is a big accomplishment in itself. For us, we see the private sector also as that plays a key role in addressing trafficking and exploitation for forced labor. And along with other actors, we see employers and recruiters as the persons or the entities that can make a great contribution for counter-trafficking efforts by really implementing ethical recruitment practices and facilitating access of migrant workers to the rights, justice, and remedies. We in IOM, we have been promoting an international program that is called IRIS, and it's precisely fostering ethical recruitment. So IAM offers a wealth of resources and practical tools for companies that seek to do so, and developed through our flagship initiatives on migration, business, and human rights. And we aim at building strong partnerships with the private sector, following our new private sector engagement strategy. So this is now something that is also very, very current, in line with the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. And in the context of the European Union, for instance, there's a new directive that is going to be very active, a reality very soon. And it's called the Corporate Sustainability Directive, Due Diligence Directive, that will help precisely to in the aspect of prohibiting not only child labor and forced labor, but also trafficking in persons. So IAM is advocating for stronger legal safeguards for businesses to more proactively prevent and combat trafficking in persons and forced labor, also in supply chains. And we're doing so as part of our current co-chairing agenda of the Interagency Coordination Group Against Trafficking in Persons, as well as through our input to the work of the United Nations Task Force for Combating Human Trafficking and Forced Labor in the Supply Chains, among other avenues. So recent global estimates show that the total number of people in various situations of exploitation has increased. Thank you for turning back, indeed, because I was thinking that it is in the report also of UNODC, the latest one, it was very clear that the occurrence of forced labor among migrant workers is more than 3 times higher than that of non-migrants. So as IAM, we curate the first and largest global data portal on trafficking in persons, publishing harmonized data from organizations around the world, the Counter-Trafficking Data Collaborative. And we join forces with a variety of partners then to analyze and interpret the data for policy making. And it is one of the priorities of the Director General-elect, Ms. Amy Pope. One of the main goals will be to support governments in building regular migration pathways that foster synergies between migration and development and promote human mobility that is safe, dignified, regular, and sustainable. Another important aspect that we're looking at, and I'm just touching very quickly on a number of things, but I think this is also important in the recent months and a year, is trafficking for forced labor in emergency contexts that really remains an under-addressed issue. So our experience of early action as part of the Ukraine crisis response clearly shows that the lessons learned from 2014 and the immediate attention of all actors to the risks of human trafficking among people displaced within and outside of Ukraine was a factor that really contributed to the absence of a spike in trafficking cases to date since the start of the full-scale war. Yes. So in Switzerland, for instance, I wanted to show you that indeed, it is in the TIP report, it is in tier 2, and for a few years. And so we've been working with all the stakeholders, the government and NGOs and other UN agencies in terms of, looking at the fact or that even if it's a developed country, it's a destination and transit country for human trafficking. So really things are happening here as well, and especially we have been assisting a number of more than 500 victims through our services, thanks to the support of the State Secretary for Migration. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight is that indeed, even though it is enshrined in the Swiss Penal Code, we have been identifying as an obstacle the fact that when victims are exploited in other countries, let's say of other countries of the European Union, and they come to Switzerland, they cannot be assisted or supported by the local network and referral network. So this is something that, for instance, is being addressed as part of the National Action Plan. And here you can see a bit of the kind of activities that we are involved in for many years already. So the most important, obviously, is the coordination within the country with the other stakeholders in the National Action Plan Against Trafficking, which is a bit of a strategic plan for 2023 to 2027. And then there's also a lot of awareness raising that has to happen, and then I will finish with that, which is the October weeks. So to celebrate 18th of October, which is the European Day Against Trafficking. So we are organizing a number of activities all over Switzerland, and you can access the website and check all the 29 events that we are organizing in 11 cantons with 38 partners. This year, we're focusing on the structural causes and reasons for human trafficking. And so we hope also that we, as I was referring before, to really look into a collaboration, particularly also with private sector and others. So I think that's all from my side, and thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Dr. Fernandez. Indeed, quite interesting. And as you just mentioned, there will be in the next weeks interesting events happening all over Switzerland, thanks to IOM. So now we have now Ambassador Cindy Dyer, and again, very grateful that she provided us with this video statement.
Excellencies and distinguished colleagues, I am honored to address you all today to discuss the impact of the U.S. Department of State's Trafficking in Persons Report, TIP report, on global awareness raising and prevention efforts. I want to thank Ambassador Michel Veuthey for inviting me to speak at this important event. It is crucial that we continue to work together to prevent and combat human trafficking, protect victims, and promote international cooperation. The TIP report serves as an important diplomatic and diagnostic tool in the global fight to end human trafficking. It raises the awareness of human trafficking and reflects our commitment to global leadership on this key law enforcement and national security issue. This year's report highlights the importance of international cooperation and partnership in preventing and combating human trafficking. Tackling this crime requires a global coalition that shares resources, information, and best practices to detect key and emerging vulnerabilities, increase victim identification, support victims and survivors across the globe, and meaningfully engage with the survivor community and other important stakeholders to inform our efforts. We continue to work closely with survivor leaders on our Trafficking in Persons reports. In the 2021 report, we highlighted and emphasized the importance of meaningful survivor engagement, and in our 2022 report, we had the honor of working with survivor leaders and experts in drafting an introduction essay focused on survivor engagement. For example, we documented increasing efforts by governments on consulting and engaging survivors to incorporate their input into national policies and anti-trafficking approaches. Partnerships like these are crucial in the fight to end human trafficking. Survivors are essential partners in the anti-trafficking movement as they possess and bring invaluable first-hand perspectives that can improve programs, policies, and strategies. Turning to overall government actions, we recognized 24 upgrades to countries' tier rankings across the 2023 TIP report based on increasing efforts that had tangible impact. Many of these upgraded countries advanced systemic improvements to strengthen effectiveness in anti-trafficking efforts. From these 24, there are two examples I would like to highlight, though I wish I could highlight more during these brief remarks. Denmark returned to Tier 1 as a result of government-wide efforts to prosecute more traffickers, convict traffickers for the first time in 3 years, and identify more trafficking victims. And the Seychelles was upgraded to Tier 1 after convicting the most traffickers the government has reported in a single year, prosecuting more trafficking cases, increasing funding for victim services, and opening and providing services at its first anti-trafficking shelter. We use the TIP report's analysis to identify and target important vulnerabilities and drivers of human trafficking and help shape our responses. For example, the Russian government engaged in conduct that substantially increased vulnerability to trafficking of certain populations. The government's forcible transfer of thousands of Ukrainian children to Russia, including some who were forcibly separated from their parents or guardians, greatly increased the separated children's vulnerability to trafficking. Moreover, Russia's aggression against Ukraine resulted in millions of refugees fleeing Ukraine and persons internally displaced in Ukraine, all of whom are highly vulnerable to trafficking. The scale and scope of such conduct raise real and serious concerns regarding significant potential risks of trafficking. In response, we continue to engage governments in the region and across Europe that are welcoming refugees from Ukraine to raise awareness about human trafficking and to encourage governments to integrate anti-trafficking measures into their emergency and humanitarian response mechanisms to prevent trafficking and protect any trafficking victims. The TIP report also guides our foreign assistance. We work to advance whole-of-government anti-trafficking responses and support capacity building to expand access to justice and protection to those most vulnerable. We coordinate with foreign governments and experts and urge them to proactively screen all vulnerable populations, especially migrants and returnees, for indicators of human trafficking, to strengthen and standardize procedures for referring all potential victims to specialized protection services, and to provide comprehensive support to trafficking victims to minimize their re-victimization and re-exploitation. Important progress has been made, but there is much more work to be done. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, traffickers have taken advantage of and adapted to new and emerging trends. Their increasing presence online has made it more difficult to prevent, detect, and prosecute. Governments must consider the implications for vulnerable populations that are increasingly exposed to a largely unregulated and unmonitored environment, and bolster trainings and resources to effectively detect and monitor fraudulent offers and investigate human trafficking online. Ultimately, the TIP report is a call to action. As Secretary Blinken said on the release of the 2023 report, we have a duty and responsibility to do everything in our power to hold traffickers accountable for their crimes, protect victims and survivors, and address any policies or systems that exacerbate vulnerabilities that traffickers target. I hope today's discussion helps raise awareness and build multi-stakeholder collaborative efforts to respond to and prevent trafficking in persons. Thank you.
I would like to express my gratitude to Ambassador Dyer and to say that I like her call to action. I like also underlining the role of survivors in programs and policies. And now I have really the great pleasure to ask Professor Obokata to take the floor.
Well, thank you very much for to the organizers and sponsors for inviting me this afternoon. I am Tomoya Obokata, Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Slavery. I've been asked to talk a little bit about how I can raise awareness about various issues. But to begin with, the issues that I deal with include forced labor, worst forms of child labor in particular, because they are most vulnerable, and sexual exploitation, which may amount to sexual slavery, as well as child and early marriage. So these are the issues, and as well as the traditional form, which unfortunately still exists in certain parts of the world. And so I, examine all of these issues globally. My mandate is global, so I do not particularly pay particular attention to one region. I look at all regions. And one of the crucial ways that I raise awareness is through my thematic reports that I publish or submit to the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly. So as you might recall, earlier this week, I presented my report on to the Council on homelessness as a cause and consequence of contemporary forms of slavery, where I examine how people in a situation of homelessness are particularly vulnerable to exploitation and abuse. So when I taken up this post back in 2020, I chose to focus on particularly vulnerable groups. So this year, homeless individuals, and last year I talked about the exploitation of minorities in different parts of the world. And the year before that, displaced populations, refugees, internally displaced persons, as well as asylum seekers. So I wanted to shed a spotlight on these particularly vulnerable people with a view to raise awareness and about some of the deep-rooted causes and consequences in terms of exploitation and abuse. And I also submit a report to the General Assembly. That's more like wider issues in relation to, for example, SDG implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Target 8.7, which calls upon all member states to eliminate these practices by 2030, but particularly the worst forms of child labor by 2025. And I continue to monitor the progress of various states, as well as the actions implemented by non-state actors, particularly civil society groups and faith-based groups, as well as trade unions and other businesses as well. And every one of us have an important role to play. So I try to advocate their activities with a view to, again, raise awareness of the important work that these non-state actors perform to prevent and suppress contemporary forms of slavery. So for the General Assembly, I've done a report, for example. I'll be in New York next month to present a report on the role of technology in preventing and also facilitating these practices. So I was looking at how the internet, the dark web, and other technologies are being used to recruit, traffic, and exploit vulnerable populations. But at the same time, that emerging technologies are being used to actually detect these instances. So, for example, blockchain technology, the electronic ledger that records every single business transactions, how that can be used to identify exploitation and abuse, and also the emerging area of course, artificial intelligence, and how AI is being used to detect and identify particular words, images in the internet and website, and try to identify potential perpetrators as well as victims of contemporary forms of slavery. So I highlight some of the good examples that may exist in that regard. So I also deal with these wider issues for the General Assembly. Again, with a view to raise awareness among the general public and among academia, among the civil society, as well as member states. And I provide a series of recommendations for states to consider and take action. And also engage, it will conduct field trips or country visits or official missions twice a year. This year, I just returned from Canada, a 2-week trip to Canada where I met a large close to 200 stakeholders, including close to 100 workers themselves, so that I can listen to what they have gone through and listen to the concerns of a wide variety of stakeholders, including the federal and the provincial governments in the case of Canada. Again, with the view to raise awareness among those and also and educate the general public and so on. So these are some of the things I do in my work, and I also engage with victims directly and so on. So those are kind of my basic roles, and I'll be very, very happy to expand on some of these at a later stage. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wakata. Indeed, you are doing, if I may say so, an excellent job, both in Geneva, New York, and also with your field visits. And allow me, on behalf of the Order of Malta, to thank you for mentioning the faith-based organizations. As you know, that was the question I asked you on Monday, and you kindly answered, yes, I do take those religious organizations in my in consideration. So thank you very much again. And now I think it's Mrs. Eckstein. She will speak by video.
Good afternoon. I am Alice Eckstein, Director of the Finance Against Slavery and Trafficking Initiative, otherwise known as FAST. FAST is a program at the United Nations University Center for Policy Research in New York City. As part of a global think tank for the UN system, we deliver insights within that system to member states and to other actors who create and implement policies in support of the Sustainable Development Agenda. FAST began with the Liechtenstein Financial Sector Commission on Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking. We act as a knowledge partner for governments, multilateral organizations, and financial sector actors who join us in our commitment to end these exploitative practices in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, and specifically SDG Target 8.7. This focus on financial actors is based on what we've identified as 3 primary points of interaction between contemporary slavery, modern slavery as we call it, and the financial sector. First, profits from modern slavery flow into the financial sector and are laundered there. Second, the sector offers financial services to and invests in businesses that profit from modern slavery, and can apply leverage as investors, bankers, and creditors to end such practices. And finally, importantly, the sector can offer financial inclusion to increase the resilience of individuals and communities to shock, and thus reduce their vulnerability to exploitation. I know all of you who are invested in the fight against modern slavery are aware of how gravely these practices violate the human rights of individuals and how severely they impact upon communities. And I am sure the numbers will be discussed today, that as of 2022, some 50 million people were living in situations of modern slavery on any given day, affecting every country in the world, an increase of over 20% from the previous 5 years. These are figures that alarm us all, but they are not insurmountable, provided we build strong partnerships to end these exploitative practices. Based on the connections to modern slavery I described, FAST has worked to foster collaborations that raise awareness of the role that the financial sector has in ending modern slavery. I want to emphasize, the financial sector alone will not end modern slavery. Without the contribution of the financial sector, however, we will miss the target. So I'd like to offer some examples of progress in which collaboration with the financial sector has been central in disrupting the practices that fall under the umbrella of modern slavery. I mentioned money laundering, the $150 billion that flow into the financial system annually from traffickers and enter the formal economy. To address this, we promote collaboration and knowledge sharing to accelerate the identification and freezing of assets related to modern slavery. Financial institutions can be trained to identify human trafficking indicators through transaction monitoring and generate suspicious activity reports for investigation by financial intelligence units. Better tools to detect suspicious transactions and greater awareness of the nature of the crime are essential to support financial sector actors in generating such reports. Earlier this month, recommendations developed by FAST were unanimously adopted by the Eastern and Southern Africa Anti-Money Laundering Group, and all 20 member states have agreed to regularly report on implementation of actions that include ensuring financial institutions report on suspicious activity and include human trafficking in the risk assessments. Now, this is the first time a regional body of this type has prioritized modern slavery as part of its action to address money laundering and the financing of terrorism. It's a notable example of global leadership from this regional body. Second, I cited the leverage that the financial sector has as investors, bankers, insurers, and creditors for business operations. FAST works with investor coalitions such as Investors Against Slavery and Trafficking Asia Pacific and CCLA Investment Management Limited's Find It, Fix It, Prevent It program. Their efforts show that along with awareness comes action. Finally, in focusing on the human rights violation of contemporary slavery, we cannot neglect the role of financial exclusion as a risk multiplier for vulnerable populations. The financial sector, in partnership with humanitarian missions, civil society, and governments, can reduce vulnerability through financial inclusion for people at risk. I'd like to end with one example of this. Since February 2022, nearly 6 million refugees from Ukraine have been recorded in Europe. In many cases, these refugees lacked formal documentation or regular addresses in receiving countries, which might have prevented their access to bank accounts or other financial services. The European Banking Authority, noting the risk of trafficking for these refugees, provided guidance to banks on providing no-fee bank accounts and other services through simplified customer due diligence and know your customer processes. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian refugees were able to access financial services through European banks as a result. The successes in providing these necessary services for people displaced by conflict and crisis in Europe could similarly be applied globally, and they will have to be if we want to end modern slavery. We know that when crisis strikes at individual or societal levels, traffickers see that crisis as a business opportunity. Financial sector actors, working in partnership with governments, civil society, multilateral bodies, survivor leaders, and affected communities, have the capacity to disrupt business as usual for traffickers and exert a strong preventative effect. We need to continue to support the disruptive capacity of financial sector actors through these partnerships. In closing, while we have seen a significant uptick in awareness of modern slavery and engagement by the financial sector, I also noted the overall situation globally has followed a different, negative trajectory. These negative trends are expected to persist due to the economic and social impacts of ongoing and emerging conflict situations and the climate crisis. The participation of the financial sector in sustained efforts to identify, address, and prevent modern slavery is thus of heightened importance during this critical time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Eckstein. And now we have a few minutes for taking questions. Are there any questions here in the room? Are there any questions online? Yes, Liechtenstein, please.
I have a question to Mr. Hansen on your first slide. Numbers. I saw a stunning counterintuitive figure. 17 people who are subject to forced labor trafficking working in a private industry, which is only a third of the whole number of 50. That is a little bit weird. So that means 2/3 of people who are subject to forced labor in the United States work for government. I mean, what's the remainder? If 17 work in the private businesses, that means The other 2/3 of the total number must be working non-private.
I can just add, the 50 million number, that is not for forced labor. That's about half of that is for forced labor.
Yes.
And then the other half is for forced and child marriage, according to the global estimate done by Work3 and ILO and the IOM. So that partly explained that, to answer a question, Your Excellency, that means like more than half of them are exploited in private sector. And I do believe that is the case as well.
Thank you very much, Professor Bacata. Oh, yes, the Dominican Republic, please.
Thank you. I would like to thank the Order of Malta for the organization and the IOM and also Liechtenstein. I've been also involved for a long time with the trafficking of human beings, and it's a thing that I really interested in the study and the follow-up. I would like to know, because this year the IOM is working in the causes of the trafficking of human beings, and so we have identified that like poverty, inequality, and the lack of opportunities in the countries of origin normally can be one of the causes of the trafficking. Now we're discussing here in this session about the right of development. What are the answers of the causes that IOM or other investigations have like identify like the main reason, because trafficking is still like increasing and a part of this that you're going to talk in this all the meetings you are and activities you are pointing out for this year. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we're with the steering committee, that is the national steering committee that is linked to the organization of all these events in Switzerland. We have it was a consensus that this year we needed to look into precisely the drivers also of trafficking and the consumer aspect of it, no? So to educate a bit more and raise awareness around the issue that when things are, products are cheaply produced, or you might be going around in Switzerland and thinking that everything is fantastic, but that's not necessarily the case, no? So that was one of the points that was, or let's say, an initiative also from the local counterparts. They felt that was also, and we agree with that also, that this is the focus for this year. Definitely also another important point, globally we see, not only Switzerland, but we've seen also this year the impact of climate change and how this week also there's the climate change week is in New York. So we're looking also at the link with vulnerabilities that are being exacerbated, as it was also mentioned in the financial sector, but also due to climate change, and perhaps also my colleague here can complement on that. So yeah, I think for us, the demand and the customer side of things and awareness raising there is quite important. That we all are clear that when a tomato is very, very cheap, maybe it's because there was exploitation, right?
Well, I certainly do agree with what you were saying about that, like what supply and demand dynamics and the role of consumer. That has been actually neglected in our studies and so on, and see how we can raise awareness among them. It's not an easy task, I think. Like under this economic crisis and cost of living crisis, and the people do want cheap goods, but behind that, then there may be instances of child and forced labor, which does raise concern from my point of view. So I've always kind of struggled to think of ways to reach out to these populations as well. So that's the point well taken, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bacata. Thank you, Dr. Another thing, actually, I would like to say that one thing we discussed during our webinars was monitoring supply chains, and especially monitoring supply chains of public procurement, because not only individual consumers, but also public communities.
Yes, I think you just raised an important point. It's not just about private businesses, that the way the government, also pays attention to, supply the goods. And I just came back from Canada, and there was a very good example where, they developed a new public procurement policy and making sure that the goods that they're purchasing from private businesses do not engage in these practices. And it's one good example that I heard from the Canadian government was this cancellation of a contract with one particular company which was sourcing gloves, PPEs, produced in a particular country, and something like that I think is becoming increasingly important. And also it's a neglected area, so that I do also hope to again shed a light on good practice like that, and then spread that word among the international community so that we can learn from each other. I think that's a spirit of mutual learning is quite important, I think.
Thank you very much. Another question? Yes, please. Please give us your name, please. Yeah.
So I had a question because last session during the resolution on child and early forced marriage, they included language for the first time that it would include forced marriage, but also forced religious conversion, which has actually led to a lot of impunity in these cases. And I wanted to thank the Special Rapporteur and your teams for releasing the communication on Pakistan. And also that it was not only the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religious belief, but many other special procedures. So my question is, how can this issue, because it's I have colleagues who work on Pakistan, just how it's not only freedom of religious thought and religious belief, but also there's instances of torture, like you mentioned, forced labor within these marriages, sexual exploitation. How can this issue be raised at a higher level and not just, among special procedures, but also with the OHCHR Secretary General, how can this issue, because it is, unfortunately, we not only see it in Pakistan, there's cases in Egypt, Nigeria, and in, for example, in Yemen, in the Houthi controlled areas, there's instances of the same practices.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that. And I do my best in raising this awareness, and the approach that we take, of course, is to have a constructive dialogue with the countries concerned. So we open up a dialogue, and many countries do respond, but others don't. So in that case, then we do not necessarily speak to the Secretary General of the UN and things like that. But the one way that we can do is to put more focus on this particular issue in my thematic report, and we are in conversation with other special procedures and see if we can do something to raise the awareness, maybe hosting events and things like that. But if you are thinking of something like that, please do get in touch with us. I'll be very happy to appear in webinar and so on, and speaking to a decision and policymakers at different levels. I'm very happy to do so. And please do keep in touch. If you see any other instances in different parts of the world, please do get in touch, and I'll communicate directly with the governments concerned.
Oh, thanks again, Professor Vakata, not only for your answer, but also for your commitment. And I think we are coming close to the end of this meeting, but thank you very much to all speakers, beginning with Dr. Fernandez and you, Professor Vakata, and obviously Ambassador Dyer and Dr. Eckstein. And I would like to say that clearly what we could hear is a call to action, but a call to partnerships. Partnership between governments, international organizations, civil society, and between different special rapporteurs. And I think now clearly we need more mobilization on this at the eve of the 75th anniversary of the human rights and the Universal Human Rights Declaration. And I would also like to say a word of thanks not only to the co-sponsors and to participants, but also to the staff of the permanent mission of the Order of Malta, Mrs. Silvia Bondi, Emanuele Piluso, Yannick Galeazzi, and Yves Reichenbach. And I wish you all a good afternoon, and I thank you for all trying to raise awareness and support victims and survivors of modern slavery. So, thank you very much, and hope to stay in contact. This video recording, this event will be video recorded, so you can watch it and you can share it if you want with people who would have liked to be here today. So, thanks again, and have a good afternoon.